It will be our life right now.
Seeing you rather than me.
Yeah, no worries. The lag here, right, is 10-15 seconds.
Okay.
Yes. So, start.
No, it's not yet.
No worries. Slowly to bring this friend here, I've got light to then slowly moving.
Good afternoon. My name is Daniel. Welcome to the P1 Masterclass. What I aim to do is to go through the key concept of P1, especially for the examination purpose. The P1 started from December 2007. The examination team has some changes though. Recently, I was in London in April 2017 and found the examiner, the original examiner that started the exam since December 2007 has retired from the examination team, and there are some new examiners added to the team because of the fall examination session. So therefore the style of examinations has started to change a little bit, as you probably can see in the September 2017 exam question. First, let's go through the major topics in the syllabus. P1 examination format has remained unchanged since it started in December 2017. Section A is based on one big scenario, about a couple of pages story, and there will be sub-question A, B, C, D. The aim is to cover different part of the syllabus. So therefore there could be question A in corporate governance, question B in risk management, question C in internal controls, and question D in ethics. And usually in the last part, question D or question E, there will be also 4 marks, professional marks awarded. That will be for the format of your answer and the structure of your answer. Those are for the questions that need to be answered in a certain format, specified format like the letter format. The letter could be written from the company CEO or chairman to the shareholders, but we also see exam questions where the letter format need to be written from the company's CEO to government officer, such as a health minister. So those format marks are in addition to the technical marks. So that is section A. Section B, there will there are 3 questions. We need to answer 2 of them. Each of them is 25 marks. The scenario will be a lot shorter than the scenario in question 1. It's about half a page of A4. The whole story will be covered, and the question is a bit more focused. So for example, it can be the entire question 2 on risk management, or entire question 2 on internal controls. So personally, my advice to my students is to answer section B in the examination first and answer section A last. But the aim is to complete the 2 questions in section B within an hour. So and it is doable, it is possible, mainly because the questions are very focused on a part of the syllabus like risk management. So the story will be very coherent. It doesn't have to be spread out into different syllabus. So it is less complex to read the scenario in section B. So within an hour, if we can finish 2 questions in section B, it is still 50 marks anyway. But the mental state of the candidate in the exam will be very different, because you can imagine within an hour or so, you have finished 50 marks question. So you still have about 2 hours to go for your another 50 marks. So the confidence level is different. So you contrast it with another approach. You start with question 1, and within an hour you probably just finish reading the scenario and maybe attempted section A, question 1A. So within 2 hours you probably finish question 1, but then you tell yourself, now I have an hour left for another 50 marks. So the mental state is slightly different. So my student have been using this approach and do quite effective results. So I hope you might want to consider that. Now, in terms of the key part of the syllabus, the examinations are centered around 4 key topics: governance, risk management, internal controls, and ethics. Now, in governance, this part here of the syllabus have the most topics to cover, but in terms of the exam weightage, it is almost equivalent to internal control, risk management, and ethics in terms of marks given. Now, but there are some topics that are slightly more important than others within governance. So for example, the role of chairman and role of NED, the role of shareholders, come up in exam more often and with more weightage than questions such as the board structure, or whether it's a principle based versus rule based. So we need to know the difference between ED and NED, but primarily so that we can appreciate the role of the NED. Now, exam questions, the case study based question usually test us on role of individuals, like the role of chairman, the role of the chief executive, the role of non-executive directors. So later on we'll go through one recent exam question on the role of chairman, but the question does not award any mark for memorizing the role. The questions is entirely case study based. So we have to look at the problem in the case study and say that if the board had an effective chairman, which of the roles of the chairman will be applicable, and the problem that they face might have been prevented. So this needs us to apply the role into the case. So the next is the role of shareholders. Recently, in the September 2017 exam question, there was a question in question 2 that asked about the rights and responsibility of shareholders. So that effectively covered the roles. Then we have the next subsection, which is the role of committees. So there are 3 basic committees that are mentioned in the Code of Corporate Governance: Audit Committee, Remuneration Committee, and the Nomination Committee. So in the past, the committee questions do not come out in exam very often, but since the change in the examination teams, we have seen in the recent exam question, like Audit Committee comes out pretty frequently. So we suspect someone within the new team have a lot more understanding about audit committee, and therefore it has started to become a bit more active topic. Then the last three within governance will be the principle-based approach towards corporate governance, like those adopted in the United Kingdom and Australia, and the rule-based corporate governance approach, essentially the United States approach. And lastly, the corporate governance in the public sector and the corporate governance in family business. So these are the topics within governance. Now the next big group is the risk management. So it starts from the overall risk management framework. So this requires us to know for example, the COSO framework. But as Alan did mention, we do not necessarily need to apply COSO. Something equivalent might be acceptable. So essentially is if a company wanted to implement an entity-wide risk management framework, what will be the key steps they have to go through? So for example, they need to first align the risk appetite to their strategic objective. Then they need to have a process of identifying risk, quantifying the risk, and then a process of developing different risk strategies to manage the risk, and the cost-benefit analysis of each. Then they have to choose those that are cost-effective using the ALAP principle. Then they will implement the strategy. So that's when they start to implement system of recording, reporting, communication, start to create a culture of risk management so that it is embedded. So this will be the framework. So we need to know the framework. But the next part of the exam is to talk about the different risks in the exam scenario. So the most recent example was a question that asked about what is environmental risk and identify the source of environmental risk. So it is no longer just about memorizing the definition of the different types of risks, like legal risk, market risk, reputation risk, but looking at the exam case study and say that what give rise to this kind of risk in this company. So the sources of risk are important. Now, and we also started to see the examination team has this kind of question. Part A, to identify the risk, and part B, how to manage the risk, not necessarily using TARA. So the question does not talk about TARA or the risk management strategy, just talk about how to mitigate the risk, the measures that could have taken, and the answer may not necessarily in line with the 4 TARA. So a lot of them are primarily internal control based, which is just a reduction strategy. So the next part is to assess risk. So in exam, we do have to comment on a particular risk, the probability of the risk based on the scenario, the facts in the scenario. But the conclusion we have to make is either it's a high risk or a low risk, and the reason why, using the evidence from the case. The risk management strategy essentially follows the TARA: transfer risk, accept risk, reduce risk, and then avoid risk. And we have to apply the suitable strategy according to the scenario. So for example, if it's a low probability, low impact, so if you recommend avoid, and that will be the wrong risk strategy. So in this particular topic, we have to do 2 things. Number 1, sometimes we are asked to describe the strategy generally, and then number 2, choose the right one for the given risk in the exam case study, justify your choices. So for example, if the risk is high probability and low impact, it doesn't make sense to do a transfer because the impact is low. So if we buy insurance to mitigate the impact, transfer financial loss, we are transferring low impact. So the effectiveness of the strategy is not really there. So it might be better to implement internal control to reduce the probability of this risk from happening, because it's high probability risk. So the next topic in the risk management is subjective risk and objective risk assessment. So besides the definition of these two, the examiner focus is more on the subjective risk assessment. For example, in the risk assessment that the company performed, is it subjective or objective? And it is subjective, then why is it not so useful for the management? So essentially it's because by the nature of being subjective, it is not reliable. So the probability and the impact are based on best guess. So it becomes a bit difficult for management to use that as a basis to formulate their risk strategy. So should they spend a lot to mitigate the risk, because they are not even sure whether the risk assessment results stating that it is high risk can be trusted. So they might be committing too much of resources and it become a waste. So it becomes less useful to the management. So the examiner focus on the usefulness of the risk assessment. So the next part of the syllabus is the definition of related risk and correlated risk. So in the exam case study, beside the definition, the case study question will ask you to comment on two risks in the case and whether they are correlated, and if they are, so are they positively correlated or negatively correlated. So usually we look at whether they are created, the risks arise from the same event. So if a common event created both risks, then they are related. But the correlationships then depends on whether after that event happened, both risks move in the same direction, like both of them will increase. So if they move in the same direction, we will then conclude they are positively correlated. If they move in a different direction, for example, one risk increases as a result of the event and the other one reduce, then we'll conclude they are negatively correlated. So in one of the exam question, candidates are asked to make a conclusion. We are supposed to explore and conclude whether they are positively or negatively correlated. So we need to observe the movement of the risk. Now, so the next in the risk management topic is embedding risk, making risk part of the culture of the company. So the exam question is very straightforward, and it is very predictable. If this come up, is what are the measures a company can take to embed a risk culture. So usually it starts off with the management, the board, and the chairman, CEO setting the tone from the top. So they have to mention that this is important. So, and next is about implementing the risk, for example, providing training so that the employee become aware of risks that the company face. They are able to recognize risk, and they are also aware of their individual responsibilities, and this responsibility are then written into the job description so that they know they can internalize it as what they need to do. They are also given incentive, so therefore part of embedding risk is the incentive of bringing up risk, the incentive of being alert to risk in day-to-day duty in the work, so that people are rewarded for being aware of risk. People are rewarded for being highlighting risk, rather than it is a culture that discourage people from talking about something negative, culture of blaming each other when risks happen. So the next part is the role. So all this work about risk management, determining risk, assessing risk, monitoring risk, and looking at risk report, who is supposed to do the work? So the work will be done by the risk committee and the risk manager. So this in exam is straightforward. It's asking you what does a risk committee do and what does a risk manager do. Now and then, but we must bear in mind, risk committee is not one of the 3 committees that are specifically mentioned in the Code of Corporate Governance. So in fact, it implies that risk committee is not a mandatory committee or it is an optional committee. So in the role of audit committee, it did mention in the code, unless there's a separate risk committee, the risk management responsibility will be with the audit committee. So it kind of implied some companies do not have risk committee. Risk management duty is then within the remit of audit committee. So there was an exam question recently. The case scenario is the company does not have an audit committee. So the risk committee's responsibility now is performed by the audit committee, but they are exploring setting up a risk committee separately. And the question is then, what is the benefit to the company if they do have a separate risk committee? So essentially it's about, for example, more resources are being dedicated, so that in the past only the audit committee looked after both. Now we have some more resources looking specifically into risk. So the sharpened focus is a benefit to the company. Second, because this risk committee is set up at the board level, so the minute it is set up, it is a message from the board to the rest of the company that this is really important. That's why the board wanted to have a risk committee. So this is part of what we call the risk embedding, setting the tone from the top. So that is another benefit. So this need you to look at the scenario. They did not have a risk committee who is doing that role, and now if they had one, then what are the additional benefits between the two? So the last topic in the risk is risk audit. So for risk audit, the exam questions are pretty straightforward. It's about the different stages of the risk audit. So we need to talk about stage 1. The risk auditor will come and take a look at the company risk and identify. So you need to look out for exam scenario again. There are two types of scenario. One, the company had never done a risk management before. So they have not identified risk, they have not maintained a risk register that record the risk. So the risk auditor then will have to identify the risk for them and then record this risk on their behalf into the risk register. So the risk auditor will be then assessing the risk. Then the stage 3, the risk auditor will look at the current internal control that they have implemented. Are they effective in managing the risk identified? So the last stage, the risk report will then be to tell the management, these are the risks that you face and what are the key risks that the board need to immediately pay attention to take measure to address the risk. Then it will talk about the internal control that need to be strengthened. So this is a type 1 scenario, but there's a type 2 scenario where the company already had done the risk management. So they have risk identified, they recorded the risk into a risk register. So now the risk auditor will again in stage 1 perform risk assessment, risk identification. But now the idea is not so much of telling the board this is a risk that you face. It's about looking at whether the risk register that the company maintain is updated. So because risk change, so the risk might not be updated. So therefore, if it's not updated, then the risk auditor will then highlight what needs to be updated. The new risk need to be added, and then the obsolete risk need to be then removed from the risk register. And the next step, stage 2, is still the same. The risk auditor will still assess risk, probability and impact. And the idea is some of the risk assessment done in the past by the company could have changed. The probability of the risk might have increased or reduced. So it needs to be updated because the risk strategy need to respond to the change in risk. So the stage 3 is still looking at the risk strategy. But now is to tell the management whether the risk strategy they put in place is still effective or needs updating, and all this will be reflected in the risk report in stage 4. So although it is a straightforward topic, it's just the 4 stages of risk audit. we still need to actually apply that to the case study. So these are two different scenarios. Now, the next part of the syllabus is internal controls. Now, internal controls in terms of content that we need to learn is not a lot. So, number one, the objective of internal control, and number two, the different components of internal control, and third, the limitations of internal controls. So, despite the fact that control procedures have been implemented, it might not work. Why? And then the next is the role of internal audit in improving the quality, effectiveness of internal control, and the key content of an internal control report. And this internal control report is a report issued by the board to the shareholders. So what are the key content? So in terms of technical content, we don't have a lot to go through, but in terms of exam, the weightage is in terms of the marks given, and also the frequency of exam, it almost is examined in every examination. So this is relatively important but easier to handle topic compared to governance. So the next key part of the syllabus is ethics. Now the ethics are primarily divided into business ethics and professional ethics. So professional ethics, usually the case study is about a professional accountant, but the business ethics will be the corporate social responsibility of a company and how it contributes to the society in terms of social impact and environmental impact. So the recent emphasis on CSR is based on an article that was written quite a while ago when a topic is added to P1 called CSR strategy versus strategic CSR. What is the difference between the two? So later on, I believe we have a question to illustrate that, and I'll come to that later. And next is the concept on social footprint, environmental footprint. Now this in exam, there will be an easy part which is a definition of it, but then there will be also the part about case study. And the case study will need you to comment or identify the source of footprint or evaluate the footprint. So essentially, for example, the social footprint, there was one case study, there's a finding about confirming, scientific finding, confirming the raw material or the production process of the company is hazardous, the material used is toxic. Now the scientific finding confirm it actually create health problem. And the question asks about the social footprint, but candidate misunderstand the question. The question did not ask about the company's social footprint. The question asks about the scientific findings. How does it contribute to social footprint? Now in fact the findings has more positive footprint than negative. In fact it is all positive. So students who actually talk about the company's footprint will say that because they use this toxic material, therefore it affected humans' wealth, it is negative. But the question is actually saying because the scientific finding confirm that this material is toxic, therefore as a result it increased the awareness of businesses about this material. So the businesses started to implement control to reduce the emission of it, and as a result, because of that, it improved the health of the workers and the people who come into contact of this material. As a result, it actually has positive footprint, and that is directly an evidence in the case. Second, because the scientific finding confirmed that this material is toxic, therefore on that basis there will be further research into the medicine that could be used to mitigate the impact or treat this illness that arise from the toxic material. So that is another positive footprint. So there are positive footprint in the case study that is linked to that, and student miss that out. So we need to be careful when we look at the case study, the keywords. The footprint is about what footprint. Now the next, which is quite popular in the recent exam, as in it is easy for the examiner to ask about this in case study, is the idea of stakeholders claim stakeholders claim in conflict, and how to apply Mendeley framework to evaluate the claim. So essentially, when we evaluate the claim is based on the following criteria. For example, is this a claim from a legitimate stakeholder? Legitimate stakeholders are stakeholders with the right to make a claim, who are the one with entitlement to ask for something from the company. So this right, the legitimate stakeholder will have a right that comes from the legal right. So for example, a regulator will have the right given to them by law, regulation, and then customers can be transaction specific, therefore has a contractual right, or the customer relationship itself is an economic right. So first is to evaluate this. Second is the claim a reasonable claim. A legitimate customer can be making demand that are unreasonable, so must the company deal with that? So these are legitimate stakeholder. But in the exam case study, we also have some illegitimate stakeholder. These are the one that, for example, environmental group, local residents, but they may have certain influence, and the influence come from the power that they directly had or the power they borrowed from someone else. So we need to use this to evaluate the influence. So Mendeley framework is becoming something more popular. And after that, we have something known as the ethical theory. So these are the ethical theory in scope: Kohlberg, deontology, teleology, absolutism and relativism, and 7 social position. So in the case study, it is all scenario based. So either we have to look at the case study and say that this person is in which level of Kohlberg, exhibiting the moral maturity of a post-conventional person or a conventional person, using evidence from the case. Or the other way around, the exam question will ask you, if this person is an absolutist, so how would he actually react to the situation using the absolutism principle? So there's more case studies in the base. Now for the coming exam, the ethical decision framework might not be that important. In September 2017, Darker 5Q came out in the exam question. So usually Darker 5Q and the American Accounting Association's 7-step ethical model, they kind of like they replace one another, and it doesn't come out in the exam very frequently. So once it come out, it might wait for a few exam episodes. So in the coming exam, I would not pay much attention to this. Now, and next is about accountants ethics. So in exam, the accountants ethics, usually the question is to ask the candidate to criticize the accountant's behavior, and the accountant might be acting as an accountant, might be acting as a director, it doesn't matter. When we criticize the behavior, usually the scenario will ask us to use the ethical principle, the 5 ethical principle, like confidentiality, integrity, objectivity, and the professional competence and due care and professional behavior to criticize. So, but the emphasis is in the scenario, the accountants will have multiple behaviors, different action. We need to identify the different action and then criticize the action accordingly. So one of the exam question, the accountant actually was a director, and he was sent by the company to attend a conference on internet fraud, and he went. And then when he went to the conference, he discovered the topic covered by the conference is something that he knew when he did his personal private studies, and because it's relevant to his work. So as a result, he said that I already knew this, I do not want to waste my time, I want to do something more productive. So he wanted to go to the library and do research for his next work assignment. So he thought that this is actually more useful. So this is one of the behavior we need to identify in the case study, because the question asks us to evaluate the accountant's behavior. Now the difference between evaluate and criticize is this. Criticize is always negative. Evaluate can be positive. So in this case here, most students didn't identify the behavior that he has been doing private study on his own to build up his confidence itself is actually ethical. So this is one of the exam answer that talk about he is keeping up with changes using his private time. He's maintaining his professional competence. That become a positive part of the answer. So a lot of candidates miss that point. As a result, they were not enough points for them to write in exam answer. Okay, so the last two will be the accountability part of corporate social responsibility, essentially in terms of reporting. So reporting to the shareholders, reporting to the stakeholders about companies' impact on the environment in the form of environmental report. So what will be the key content? Why is it useful to the director? Why is it useful to the shareholders? Why is it useful to the stakeholders? And same thing for the integrated report. Except integrated report is a bit newer. So the exam question focus on the key content of the integrated report, namely the 6 capitals. So this will be the overall syllabus. So as I mentioned in a few minutes ago, using some of the exam questions, we need to be able to use the information given in the case. A lot of them is about applying, looking for evidence in the case to support your point. But you do have to have the theoretical framework to frame your answer. So I'm going to illustrate that now using the role of chairman. So first we will go through the role of chairman as written in the Code of Corporate Governance. And the recent exam question do not ask you about the roles. The recent exam question will ask you how a chairman can contribute. So these are the 5 roles of the chairman. So the roles towards helping directors, the roles towards making the board effective, the roles towards so first, the role towards the board. The chairman need to make sure the board is effective. So how does a chairman achieve that? What is an effective board? For example, the board that has enough director. Okay? So in terms of the role of the board, in terms of the board's duty, we need to recognize chairman is the leader of the board, and therefore chairman need to ensure the directors are effective, the board is effective. So that includes setting board agenda. Highlight this. We're going to show that in one of the exam questions. Setting the board agenda can be useful to solve some of the problem. Okay? So setting a board agenda include calling for board meeting, how frequently and how long each board meeting will be. It also include the item to be discussed, and this is an important part. So one of the exam question, if this item is so important, it would have been selected by the chairman in the board meeting. The problem will be discussed, debated in the board, and the problem could have been avoided. So we'll see that later on in the question. So the next is the chairman's duty in helping other directors. So make sure directors receive clear, accurate, and relevant information on a timely basis. So this is especially important for the part-time director who do not have full-time access to information within the company. Part-time director don't even have, for example, a sign-on ID to go into accounting system. So they do need the chairman to help to make sure information they need for board decision is given to them way before the board meeting. Next, chairman need to help the NED. NED needs a lot of help. They do not come into the company every day, so they need to know what is going on. So this is how the chairman can help. And the exam question usually focus on this. The case study will mention the NED not effective. So then we actually can put the blame on the chairman. And one of the recent exam question, the directors below the CEO had concern about the CEO's behavior. So if the company had an effective chairman, the chairman could have helped these directors who had concern about the CEO but are too afraid to voice out the concern. So the chairman allowed them to communicate this concern in a confidential manner. So the problem about CEO dominating, abusing power will be then surfaced. The next one also appeared in the recent exam question, case study. The chairman make sure the board had an open debate So if that's the case, then the unethical decision by the ED will then be debated in the board. So the next role of the chairman is accountability role. Accountability means answerable to shareholders. So the chairman represents the shareholders to hold the director accountable, the ED. So this includes the CEO, and that is one of the primary role of chairman, to counter the balance of the CEO, to make sure the CEO and the ED do not abuse their power. And that's when he needs to make sure there's a proper balance of power between himself and the chief executive. Okay. So the next role of the chairman is to represent the board in terms of communication with shareholders. Now it doesn't mean the chairman is the sole person that communicate with shareholders, but he makes sure there is adequate communication. So for one, he needs to write a good chairman report in the annual report. He needs to speak to shareholders in the shareholders meeting, but he also makes sure all directors are present. So if there are any questions about certain specific area like audit, he can then ask the audit committee chairman to respond specifically. So the next are the role towards stakeholders. So he represents the company as like an ambassador to deal with external stakeholders. And lastly, which is the important one, so out of this role of the chairman, his role in making sure the board is effective, make sure there's board meeting, the board agenda is appropriate, and helping the NED, especially the NED that are being bullied, and holding the CEO accountable, balance of power. And the last one here, ethical value, are the more important one. Ethical value, he has a role to set the right ethical value from the top. So if he ensures there is an ethical behavior in the company, any unethical behavior by an individual director will not be tolerated. Other director will then feel that it is wrong and raise up to the board, and this unethical director will be challenged. So this is one of the important part of exam case study. We'll see that in the exam questions later on. So the next part is about to separate the role of chairman and CEO. So the exam question in terms of theory will be the benefits of separating them. So these are the 4 benefits. So you do need to have this part for the theory part, but also need to apply to the case. So the first benefit is to avoid unfettered power. Avoid someone having a power that cannot be challenged. So essentially it's to do with CEO. But CEO is a leader of the board, so they're a leader of management, so he's pretty powerful. All the ED reports to him. So if director and if CEO and chairman are the same person, then the leader of the board and leader of management is in one person. There's a concentration of power, therefore it's a bit easier for the person to abuse the power. Okay? So separating the role can avoid this risk or reduce this risk. Second, separating the role means the board is more accountable to the shareholder, because now in the board the chairman will help to balance the power of CEO and scrutinize CEO, but NED as a role of NED has a scrutiny role, which is to scrutinize ED including CEO. So there are 2 groups of director in the board scrutinizing the ED, representing the shareholder in monitoring ED, therefore reducing agency problem. Okay? And then, so this is the 2 level of accountability. And then the next role is, the next benefit is, because the 2 roles are demanding, so again, separation of duty actually means each of them is able to focus on the role, and as a result it is more effective. Okay? And lastly, the separation will then give shareholders more confidence. Number 1, because we will be able to reduce the risk of abuse of power. Number 2 is also a compliance with the Code of Corporate Governance. Okay? Now those are the theory, but the important thing in exam is how to apply this into the case study. So we are looking at this exam question, June 2015, question 1D, part 1. Now the question did not ask you to write theory, the benefits. It actually talks about, in this company called Lysis, if they have an effective chairman, then what will be the benefit? So therefore right now they didn't have an effective chairman. So when the effective chairman come in, some of the problem will be solved. So you need to look at the problem in the case study. What are the problems that they face now, and which of the problem, if there is a chairman, it could be prevented or solved. So then you link the role of the chairman into the case study. So just purely memorizing, repeating the role will not get you any mark. Now, so in this case here, the company is a business, family business. So all the directors are family members. No external director, except recently the company hired a finance director, Amy. She is a new finance director and she's inexperienced. This is her first role as a finance director. Okay? So in the case study, they were also given information that they had a domineering CEO, Simon Mara. He built the company from scratch. So, and he is the largest shareholder. He has 51% share in the company. The facts given in the case study that is he is domineering, strong, and he bully. He cannot discuss things in a calm manner. He intimidates even his senior colleague, and the senior colleague refers to other directors who are his family, his wife and his brother. And he is also so domineering that the new finance director, Amy, found that she was not able to challenge any decision by Simon. She always carried out his instruction, even though she personally felt that it is wrong. So this scenario you need to highlight in the case study, therefore, is there's a finance director who is concerned about something that the CEO is doing, but is too afraid to speak up. Therefore, when there's a chairman, then this finance director has a communication channel. The finance director could communicate this concern with the chairman. So some of the abuses could have been surfaced much earlier. So that's when the chairman is useful. Okay? Next, this CEO instructed the finance director to implement a change in the company, which is to switch the production material from a surgery grade material to cheaper industrial grade material. But this is also illegal, and the finance director knew from the beginning it is illegal. She also felt that it is unethical, but she couldn't challenge the CEO, so she followed instruction. Okay? So you can see here, she felt very uncomfortable. So you need to highlight this as an evidence. If there was an effective chairman, she could have talked to the chairman about this. Okay? Then this instruction might have been blocked. Okay? Next, the case study also mentioned about the culture, and the culture is written in this statement. The CEO, Mr. Mara, assumed because many of the senior employees were family member and he could control the finance director, Amy, so the switch to the cheaper illegal industrial material will go undetected. And we are supposed to link that to the role of chairman. And how do we do that? The way we do that is quite simple. He can do it because nobody challenged him. That's number one. So we can talk about the chairman is someone who is strong enough to challenge him. But here we are also talking about the culture is such that the directors tolerate even unethical behavior. So if a chairman set up an ethical culture within the company, then the rest of the director might actually feel uncomfortable a bit more than now. So they might voice out or they might object. So that would be the ethical value role of the chairman. So therefore you can see from here we summarize the relevant roles is the chairman should challenge the CEO, the chairman can help other directors, the chairman makes sure the decision to change to a cheaper material is discussed in the board, and the board has an open and robust debate culture, and the directors will voice out, they will vote against it because they have an ethical culture. So that will be the 4 roles of the chairman. So once you identify the 4 roles of the chairman that are relevant to the case, then you are able to frame your answer like this. Okay? So the key point in the suggested solution actually focus on this. So number 1, the chairman can challenge Mr. Mara that nobody else could because of the power of the chairman. And that's exactly the role of chairman. to make sure there's a balance of power. Okay? So we can bring the code in now. Next, the chairman can help the inexperienced director. So this finance director could have communicated her concern confidentially, and the problem would have been identified much earlier. And next, the chairman's role promote open debate, strategic idea. So therefore, the debate would have exposed this decision by Mr. Mara. It will have been voted down because the board has an ethical culture. So if you now look at the examiner's suggested solution, it becomes clearer how the answers are being derived. Okay? So that's the exam question on the role of chairman. So the learning point is, it doesn't help by memorizing. You need to be able to apply. So next, I'm going to illustrate using the role of NED, how this is being tested in the examination in a case study scenario. Now, so first we recap the theory part. Non-executive directors are part-time directors. According to the Code of Corporate Governance, they have 4 main roles. So strategy role, scrutiny role, risk role, and people's role. So we all memorize that very well. Now when we describe the role, in exam, if you just write one sentence, NED's role is to constructively challenge a business strategy proposed by the ED. Usually this will not attract a lot of mark because it doesn't say how it helped to improve the business strategy. So you need to expand on this one sentence into when the NED challenges strategy proposed by the ED, they need to make sure the strategy proposed by the ED is consistent with the strategic objective set by the board. So for example, the board's objective could be to increase the company's market share by about 50% in the next 5 years. So does the strategy focus on increasing market share, or does the strategy actually focus on increasing profit? There are two different things. So is a strategy a suitable strategy? So this is consistent with the P3 concept. Next, the NED primarily is to make sure the ED do not, because of the incentive component like the bonus, therefore propose a strategy that could be excessively risky, more risky than the risk appetite of the company. So they need to look at the risk element. So by doing this, they help to make sure the business strategy is a better strategy. So that is the first role. So you need to expand on this. Second, the NED scrutinize the behavior of ED, including the CEO, on behalf of the shareholders. So in exam, you can expand by saying, if they do that really well, then the shareholders do not need to monitor the executive directors so closely themselves. Now, if the direct shareholders do not need to monitor as closely, this is called agency cost. Agency cost will reduce. The definition of agency cost is shareholders' time and expense incurred to monitor director. So since we are NED to help them to monitor, they don't have to do it. So this becomes the benefits to the shareholder. Agency problem come down, agency cost come down. Now the next role is a risk role. So this help to make sure the company internal control and risk management is good. So you can mention this is achieved through the audit committee, but it can also be supplemented by a risk committee. So you notice when you describe the role, your answer will be a bit longer. Next, the people role is divided into two. Number one is about the appointment of directors, succession planning. Number two is about the contract and the remuneration of executive directors. So you notice I highlight executive in red because NED form remuneration committee, and the remuneration committee primarily is to recommend to the board the remuneration package of ED. Now the overriding principle in good governance is no director set their own pay. So the NED that form the RC, remuneration committee, do not recommend NED's remuneration. If not, they'll be recommending their own. So the focus is mainly on ED. So that is the people's role. Now, so the question can ask you about the role. This is different from the exam question that asks you what is the benefits of having NED. Now, benefits and role are not the same. Benefits include the role. All these rows are benefits also, but there are other benefits that are not in the 4 rows. So if the exam question asks you about the benefits of appointing effective NED, your answer can include the roles that they can perform for the company, plus other benefits such as they can bring business network, customers relationship or supply relationship, key skill relationship into the board. So a typical example will be NED that is a lawyer will be able to bring legal experience and legal network into the board. Typically, company may not have a separate legal department. So each time they need legal advice, they have to go to the law firm. But if you do have a lawyer in your board as a part-time director, it can supplement the skill of the board. So these are the other benefits. The last one, having enough effective NED is a compliance with the code, and compliance with the code itself bring benefits such as shareholder confidence. Okay? So this, your answer can be a broader answer than just simply the role of NED. Now the next part, and this is part recently examined, which is the difficulty in recruiting NED. Now some company encounter difficulty in recruiting NED, so you need to find out why, and these are the typical reason. So we need to look at the case study and say which reason is applicable and just highlight. So for example, the company is not a very large listed company, so they do have a budget constraint. As a result, they are not able to pay competitively high NED's fee. So therefore, they have difficulty. But it could be the company business is highly technical, and therefore the NED felt that they do not have the necessary technical experience to contribute to the board. They felt that they are concerned when they come to the board, they look stupid because they don't understand what is being discussed. And as a result, there is a limited pool of people who have the necessary technical experience, so it becomes difficult to recruit. But third, it could be the company is operating in a location that has limited supply of talent. So for example, a small country like where I'm from in Singapore, we have very small population, so we by nature have a limited supply of people who are qualified to be a NED. But it could be also the location of the company is remote, so even if you want to recruit from overseas or another location, they might not be willing to travel or relocate, so it becomes a constraint. And lastly, the company might not have a good reputation, or company might be perceived by others as a high-risk company. Now the NED, the non-executive directors, they sell themselves, they get appointed partly because of the personal reputation, the personal branding. So they tend to avoid company that have bad reputation because it might then have collateral damage on their personal reputation. So that makes it a bit more difficult for them to be recruited by other company if they are associated with a company that failed, for example, or had scandal. So as a result, if your company do not enjoy good reputation, become difficult to recruit. Now, so we look at this recent exam question, December 2014, question 3B. So here, the question, let me read the question first, then analyze it. It says, explain the benefits specifically to the NIC. To NIC means the company. So the benefits to this company of appointment of suitable NED, and discuss the difficulties which the company may encounter in NED recruitment. 9 marks. So the first thing in exam is you need to look at the question carefully. There are actually 2 requirements. First, this company, how do they benefit from NED? So we must look at the problem in the case study. What are the problems they face that NED can help to solve? Second is, why is it difficult for the company to recruit NED? So now in this case here, there are 4 benefits: business expertise, improve business strategy, manage the risk of a company, and compliance with the code. These are the 4 benefits. Okay? So I'll show you where in the case study we can find. So you notice you just memorize and print the note, it doesn't help. First, from the case it says that this company is set up by scientists, but the scientists do not have experience in running the business. So they need to learn how to run the board, they need to know how to run the company, and the lead scientist is Dr. Rajana Fu. So all the scientists were trying to nominate him as a CEO, but she questioned her suitability, and the case study mentioned that she prefers to work alone. She doesn't want to invest time to learn about running business. So a whole paragraph from this question means that actually the entire board right now lack business experience. So the NED who has relevant business experience, know how to run the board, can bring this to the company. So it's not about a specific role, it's about the business experience. But at the same time, they can then bring in strategy, because these are scientists. So technically they know the product of the company very well, they know the technology very well, but how to then use the technology to generate market shares, to generate shareholder return, they may not have experience. So the NED can then help them to develop strategy that are suitable to bring this technology to the market. So you can see we have two benefits now, the business expertise and the strategy role. Now, then the next part of the case study mentioned about this company went for listing. So in the listing prospectus, the analyst read it and then had a comment about the company, saying that the company is a relatively risky business, could fail within 2 years because of the high-tech nature. So it says the company need to have a very good management team and very good NED to manage the risk. So this is a risk. And one of the role of NED is risk role, making sure there is strong risk management and internal control. So we highlight the risk role here. So if they can do that, the risk of the company reduce, this increase the confidence. Remember, it's not just about reducing risk, it's about the benefit as a result of that. Then the analyst confidence in the company will increase. Shareholder confidence in the company will increase. So we need to bring this tangible benefit out from it. Okay? Now, then the next part is, because they now go for listing, so they have to comply with the code. So having enough effective NED is a compliance, and compliance is always accountability to shareholder, increase shareholder confidence. So these are the benefit. So now you notice some rules are not used at all. For example, the remuneration is not relevant here. Okay? And so we only brought in the relevant one. Now, so the next part now is the difficulty. Now the case study actually gives us enough information, evidence to show that there are 3 difficulties. The location of the company is in a remote small city. Second, the business is highly technical. Third, it is a high-risk company. So you can see here, this is what is the information in the case. The company was located in a relatively small regional city, some distance from the main center of population. We need to bring that into the answer as evidence and say that because it is a small regional city, the population is small, we have limited talent, and therefore in this kind of small community, the talented people who qualify as a director may already know each other. So if you want to find someone independent that do not know each other, become even more difficult. So you can see your discussion can be very, very in-depth, and that contribute to marks. Remember in exam, forgotten to mention earlier on, for case study answer, one key point you can get about 2 marks. So the 2 marks need you to have a strong analysis to gain 2 marks. So mainly saying that the NED can contribute to the risk role does not help. Okay? So for example here, small city. Second, remote. Now there are 2 different things. You can be a small city but you are not remote. You are easily accessible by other city, large city. You still can attract people because they might be willing to travel, they might be willing to relocate. So but if you are in a very remote location, then these talented people might say that the traveling is too much, so it become an additional constraint. So you look at the answer. The answer is very specific to the case. Number 1, in this small city, relatively few suitable people being available, and because it's remote, it becomes difficult to attract suitable people from outside the city. Okay? Now the next part, the case study mentioned that this is a highly technical business. So therefore, as I mentioned, some NED felt that they don't have the necessary technical expertise. so they do not dare to join the company, and which is quite natural and acceptable. Okay. Next, the case study mentioned that this is considered a high-risk business. So NED who read the prospectus will also understand, and they may not want to be associated with company that fail within 2 years. Then they could be blamed for the failure. So this will reflect on the competence. So this might affect their other NED appointment. So these are the difficulty. Right? So this question helped to illustrate how the NED's role in theory is being applied in a case study. Alright, so now I'm going to illustrate using another one, internal controls. Typically, internal control objectives can be a theory question. It'll attract a few marks in the exam. But these are the ones that the examiner use in most of the exam. Internal control is to help the company to have effective, efficient operation so that there's no disruption and they can meet the strategic objective. Internal control help to protect the company asset. But in P1, the assets definition is quite wide. So the examiner in the answer has written before, protecting asset include the reputation as an asset. So the examiner consider reputation as an intangible asset, and recently in the integrated report, company's reputation is also called contributing to social capital. That's why safeguarding asset is to actually increase social capital. Now, internal control help to prevent fraud. Internal control makes sure the company complies with law, regulation, standards, including company policy, instruction from client. That's how the examiner in P1 expand this part. Then number 5 and number 6 are connected to each other, related to each other. Essentially, internal control makes sure the company can produce reliable information. This information can be for internal use, the board, the management. It can be for external use, for customer, regulator, shareholders. So the impact is quite wide-ranging. So these are the 6 objectives of internal controls. Now, so we look at one recent exam question. September 2016, question 2A. So I take out part of the information. Now this question here actually has 2 parts. So you look at the one in red and then the one in black. These are 2 different requirements. First, discuss the extent to which the main objectives of internal control system were not achieved at Fortune Investment. So you can see objective of internal control. So we think about efficient, effective operation, safeguarding asset, preventing fraud, compliance. Which of these have not been achieved? So we need to find evidence and then link to the objective. And then the second part is to criticize a person's behavior called Stephen Crank. And this behavior can be criticized using the fundamental principle of accountant, but it can also be criticized using the underlying principle of corporate governance, like lack of transparency. So this is the second part, but right now we're only focusing on the first part, the internal control part. Now in exam, one of the difficulty we face is these 12 marks, how are they allocated between these 2 requirements? Internal control objective requirement and the fund manager's behavior requirement. We have no idea. So we can only assume both are case study, so it might be 6-6. Okay? Might be 6-6. And therefore, if the first part is 6 marks, each case study point that is well written can earn up to about 2 marks. So there could be at least 3 objectives that internal control will fail in the case study. So we need to find at least 3 evidence. At least 3. We can do 4 if we can find more. The idea is that if you can find 3 and you can write very well, you get 6. But if you can't, you find 4, you might be able to get enough mark. Now, so the first paragraph has a key point. This fund manager worked for a company called Fortune Investment. So Fortune Investment is a fund, and Stephen Crank is the fund manager. Very successful in the last 5 years. As a result, have a lot of bonus, and the family become very accustomed to lavish lifestyle. So this fund manager run out of luck. So in the recent month, his investment for his client kept losing money. Now he tried to recover the losses by actually investing the client's money in high-risk securities. But the case study mentioned the client only allowed him to invest in medium risk. So there's a specific client instruction that he breached. Now, so when you see this, you need to say, the internal controls in the company did not actually prevent him from breaching client instruction, did not even detect that he had breached client instruction. So therefore, the internal control did not ensure compliance. So that's first part. Second part, when he invests in this high risk security, the strategy backfired on him. So instead of making more return to cover the previous loss, he now make more losses for the client. So he started to do something more desperate. He started a fraudulent investment operation. Normally we call this the Ponzi scheme. So he used the money invested by the new client to pay off his existing client as if the investment is making money, although the investment is actually not making money. Now this is illegal, and so you can see here the internal control in the company did not stop him from doing that and did not detect his fraudulent investment scheme. So therefore did not prevent fraud. So you need to now link to the objective of internal control. Third paragraph of the story talk about one of the client of Stephen Crank, a wealthy person called James. He started to notice that his return is volatile. Now the word volatile means sometimes the return come from the fund is high, sometimes is very low. So he asked Frank why the volatility is a bit higher, last time is a bit more consistent. And so Crank just gave some excuses like, oh, actually you should look at it over a period, you're only looking at one day, that's why you see the trend. And he assured James the fund will grow in value and the volatility will then reduce, it will be just steady trend of increase. So we now know here he's actually lying to his client. Now, so he had been providing false information, false fund report. See, that's how the investor know about the return, but the report is fake. So you notice the internal control did not ensure reliable reporting. We need to link it to this objective of internal control. So now you can see we are able to then find 4 of the objective of internal control that had not been achieved. Number 1, the internal control system did not ensure he act according to client instruction. So this is a compliance rule of internal control. The fraudulent activities and fraudulent transaction caused the client to lose money, but also caused the company to lose reputation. So this internal control did not ensure protection of asset, and it actually allowed him to carry out fraudulent scheme, so did not prevent fraud. And he was able to give out misleading information, so did not ensure reliable reporting. So by bringing this evidence and link it to the objective, you answer the exam question very well. Okay? So this is how we should tackle this question in the examination. Okay, right? So this is the internal control illustration. So now I'll go through one more example, which is the shareholders' role. Now in this case here, shareholders' role in corporate governance. So we go through the technical point first that we know. These are the technical knowledge we need to have. So number 1, shareholders invested in the company obviously has certain rights, but the shareholder also has certain responsibility to perform to protect their rights. So number 1, shareholder should read corporate governance report written and issued by the director. Number 2, when the shareholder read this corporate governance report, the corporate governance report by the director essentially is to mention whether they comply with the code. So they either state that we fully comply with the Code of Corporate Governance throughout the financial year. Then the extent of compliance is 100%, or they might talk about non-compliance. So for example, in the Corporate Governance Report, they will say that we comply with all the principles in the code except one. And this is the one that we didn't comply. So then they are supposed to explain. That's why we call that the comply or explain approach. They need to give reasons to the shareholder why they didn't comply with the principle. So for example, Chairman CEO have been the same person in this financial year. So why is it so? So the shareholder then can then evaluate the non-compliance. Now evaluate means to the directors have a good reason for doing so. So if the shareholders accept the reasons, it is good for the company, then it is alright. But if they don't accept, then they can hold the directors accountable. They can question the director. They can also insist the director rectify it, do something to correct it. Now, there are situations where it is actually good for shareholders to have a CEO, chairman, same person. But these are exceptional situations. So I give you one example. There was a large listed company. The CEO went for a medical checkup and they discovered that he had cancer. So he needed to be treated. So they're going to put him to hospital. They think that initially maybe about 2-3 weeks. And but then depending on the initial treatment, it either can be shortened or it can be lengthened. So there's an indefinite period of medical absence. Absence because of medical reason. So now the board had have a decision to make. So how do we deal with the fact that the CEO will be unavailable for an indefinite period of time? So do we therefore now appoint another CEO and sack the current CEO? Or we live without a CEO? So you can see now we are caught between a rock and a hard surface. It is difficult. So what the company did, and this is a real case, they actually recommended to the shareholders they're going to appoint the current non-executive chairman to act as CEO, interim CEO, during the period when the CEO is away for medical reason. And when the announcement was made to the shareholder, the share price recovered from the initial announcement that the CEO went hospital, because the shareholder interpreted that as good. There is a leadership during this period. Now this is good for the company because they will have a leader leading the management, but at the same time when the CEO comes back from his medical problem, he can resume his duty. So it kind of solved the problem in the interim. So this is a good reason that the shareholder accepted, and that is primarily the benefit of principle base. It allows for this kind of exceptional situation. So the board need to be able to explain such non-compliance in this way to allow shareholder to evaluate, and shareholder's duty is to evaluate that and take actions accordingly. Now the next shareholder's duty is to read the financial report, annual report, internal control report, chairman's statement, risk report, and then ask director any questions. Okay? So this is to hold the directors accountable. So this is the shareholders' duty. Next, shareholders attend shareholders' meeting. Now this is a right, at the same time a duty. They have a right to go to shareholder meeting and listen to directors' presentation, explanation, also ask question, and they have a right to vote. So in the September 2017 exam, actually the question about shareholders meeting come up. What is the benefit of shareholders meeting, and how does it contribute to corporate governance? So students who just memorize the note, shareholder meeting, AGM is held once a year. Shareholder meeting, this will be discussed. There will be vote to approve directors' remuneration. They vote to approve the financial report. They vote to appoint the next auditor. And your answer will be very superficial. But if your answer then go on to talk about, in this meeting, shareholders can exercise a right. Shareholder can then hold a director accountable, and therefore this improve the governance. So you can see you have a lot more substance. So this was actually examined in September 2017. But the next part hasn't examined, which is what we're going to see later on. Now, shareholders have a right to vote, and the recommendation is shareholders need to go and vote. So if you can't vote, you can't attend the shareholder meeting personally, you can appoint proxy. So the September exam question actually asks about the purpose of proxy. So most students will then talk about the purpose of proxy is to appoint a representative, so that the shareholder couldn't attend, a representative would then attend on his behalf. But we need to go a bit deeper than that in P1 to get higher marks. So the proxy can be appointed, but it may not be appointed properly, and then the governance problem is still there. So for example, the examiner idea is the proxy should not be assigned to the chairman of the board. Now, although chairman sounds like a responsible person, but chairman is still ultimately a director, and the shareholders' vote is actually either to vote and support the board's recommendation or vote against the board recommendation. So therefore, the shareholders need to protect your own rights, and chairman may not necessarily be protecting your rights. So you should appoint your own proxy and give specific instruction to your representative how to vote, so that your intention of voting can be reflected in the shareholder meeting. So the examiner expected something more in that in the exam. Okay? So this will be the shareholders' role. But in exceptional situation, shareholders start to intervene the board. Now this is when there are serious problems. So actually in the UK, one of the committee report talks about when is the right time for the shareholders to intervene the board decision. So they are called a significant issue, and they highlighted 7 of them. So in the examination, we do have to memorize these 7 of them as a theory question, but then apply to the case. So number 1 is strategy. Now this is when shareholder had concern about strategy. Either the strategy is too risky, or the strategy is not ambitious enough. The strategy will not deliver the return what we want. But most of the time, the strategy is too risky, so we should intervene. Next, when the company performance is deteriorating, is getting worse every year, or there's a sudden, so usually this getting worse every year is over a period of time, or there's a sudden drop. Okay? And sudden drop can signal some very serious problem. So shareholders will start intervene with the board. Next is a major internal control failure, major scandal, major fraud. It shows that the management is losing control, so it's the right time to intervene. Next, when there's non-compliance and there is no good reason given, so we should intervene. And when the remuneration of ED are excessive or not linked to performance, we should start to intervene. When there are symptoms to show that the NED are not effective, it could be because we don't have enough NED. It could be because they are not independent NED. So those are the right time to intervene. And lastly, the company had unethical business behavior. So they abuse worker, they exploit worker, they contaminate the environment, and they didn't clean up. So we are losing support from the society. We are damaging our reputation, damaging social capital. This is the right time to intervene. Okay? So memorize that for exam, but then apply to the case later on. I'll show you. The next part now is how to intervene, which is called method of intervention. Now the method of intervention start from something gentle, then become more and more aggressive. So first is to bring question to the board. It can be through a letter to the chairman or the investor relation department asking the board to explain their actions. But it can be also for major shareholder to have a one-to-one meeting and then ask the director to take corrective action. But it can be something now more drastic and escalate to the shareholder meeting. So if you have enough votes, you might be able to vote to remove the director or vote against the reappointment. Sometimes it may need the shareholders to work together as a client, as a coalition to vote together. But in the worst scenario, your shares are not high enough to effect this termination of director, then the only choice you have left is to divest, sell the share. So long as enough shareholders sell the share, we don't even need majority. We need about 10% shareholders sell the share. It will create a panic. The share price drop, Now, in a way, you exited from the company, so you don't lose, but the share price drop is a punishment to the director who are still in there. So these are the methods of intervention. Now, so we apply this to this exam question. So this is a June 2014 exam question. So I took out I summarized the case study and just bring the important feature of the case study relevant to shareholders' role into today's discussion. So in the case study, it mentioned there was a report published, and the report is entitled Killer Company. In this report, they mentioned there are 3 companies operating in the same industry called baby food product. So this company manufactures baby food. So 3 company names are mentioned, and the report accused this company of mis-selling the baby food product in poor developing countries. And the baby food product are bad. They actually have negative impact on the health of baby. Some baby died. So when this report was published, 2 out of the 3 companies withdrew from the business. So they stopped this business altogether. But there's a 3rd company, Sasa company. Instead of stopping this business, they decided to increase production because they are wanting to take over the market share left by the competitors. So when this happened, there's a charity called Mother Who Care, MWC. So they are not happy with this Sasa's decision. So they organized protests. They asked the public to boycott Sasa product, all the Sasa product, not just a baby food product. And when this become a problem, shareholders are concerned. So one of the shareholder, a prominent shareholder, he owns quite substantial share. I can't remember, maybe a 10% share. He organized a shareholder meeting. So this fund manager is Hugh Obley. So when he organized a shareholder meeting, 50 shareholders, institutional shareholder, joined the meeting. So this group of shareholder become the Obley group, and to discuss the issue. And this shareholder also then went on to television to actually publicly criticize the Sasa's company and its board. So the first criticism is the board lack non-ED scrutiny. So if essentially then you notice the NED were not effective. So that's one of the reasons to intervene. Next, the board had no meaningful sense of ethics. So there's no sense of ethics. It's unethical behavior. They manufacture baby food, but they don't consider the health of their customer. Okay? So therefore they are unethical. So we should intervene. Next, it says that even if they have NED, they are not strong enough to challenge. So this is another evidence of NED not doing their job, and they have concern about strategic management. So they don't like this strategy of doing baby food business that create problem for society. And they also say the board lack concern for medium-term business risk. So therefore, the business strategy is considered too risky. So these are all evidence that the shareholders should intervene. So if you organize them as reason for intervention, it can be categorized into 3 or 4. So here we have 3. One is called the weak non-executive scrutiny. The other one is the poor attitude towards ethics. Then the next one is the strategy and the risk. So you put this, you need to categorize it under this heading so the examiner can see you're linking it to the 7 reasons for shareholder intervention, and then the evidence become your explanation. Okay? So the answer cannot be too short, but the answer can be substantial when you bring the evidence in. So this is how we apply to the case. So I have shown a few examples in the corporate governance exam question. So it's not about just memorizing. Now I'm going to show you example of risk. So this is about risk appetite. Now in exam, we need to give definition of risk appetite. But when you read the case very carefully, the case study, is it about a company or is it about an individual investor? The definition of risk appetite need to be slightly different. Now, Risk appetite is the nature of risk. Nature means what kind of risk. So are we willing to take legal risk? Are we willing to take the exchange risk? Okay? That's called the nature of risk. Level of risk means, is it high risk? How much risk we are willing to take? And this is willing to accept. So risk appetite is the risk that we are willing to accept to achieve. Now, so for corporate, it is to achieve strategic objective. For investor, is to achieve return. So therefore, your definition must be slightly different. Then you need to talk about risk appetite. How high risk appetite can be is affected, number one, if it's a company, it's the director's attitude. So some directors like to take high risk, some do not. So it's the director attitude. But even the directors who want to take high risk, it also is limited by the company capacity to take risk. Capacity usually refers to the financial resources. So do they have enough money to take risk? For investor, it's the same. His attitude, how much risk he like to take, and how much money he has to take risk. So these are called capacity. So you need to talk about two extreme. One is called risk averse. That means this kind of directors or shareholder will prefer low risk. They don't like risk. Because of that, they are willing to accept low return. So this is called the low risk, low return approach. Then the risk seeking are the directors or shareholder. They want high return. They don't mind high risk. So they'll be seeking out for high risk investment to get high return. Okay? So that will be the definition. But now we apply to case study. So if you look at the case, this is a September-December 2015 exam question. Part 1 is explain the term risk appetite. Now here I show you the examiner marking scheme. He actually gave up to 3 marks for explanation. Now we do not know actually he was willing to give up 3 marks. So most of the time I advise students consider definition question is either 1 or 2 marks. Especially those simple definition like transparency, accountability. Okay, so between 1 or 2 marks. So then if you do that in exam, then you say 7 minus 2, I have 5. Case study is always about 2 marks for each point. So 5 is about 6. We need to write about 3. So you can see the examiner say maximum 6, which is about 3. So this is how we tell ourselves how much we need to write in exam. Now, second part is case study. Assess how the risk appetite of this company influence the strategy and the risk it choose to bear. Now, so actually, we need to find the risk they are willing to take. Is it high or low? And the strategy, is it to achieve high return or low return? Then conclude on risk appetite. Remember, we need to find the risk they are exposed to. Is it high or low? And the return they are looking for, is it high or low? Then conclude, therefore, is it high risk, high return, or low risk, low return, the appetite. Okay. Now, so you can see here for the case, look for the return. Then look for the risk associated with the strategy. Decide is it high or low. Then conclude, is it risk seeking or risk averse. Okay. Now, so the answer for the risk appetite is written here. Now you look at the case. So in this case here, it mentioned that they decided to go overseas market to this developing country known as G-Land, and the reason is they have rapid economic growth. So therefore, from here we can see the strategy is actually looking for opportunity for high return. So we can use that as evidence in the answer. And therefore, this company went to bid for a project in that country to supply bathroom equipment. They won the contract. This is to supply bathroom equipment for a new hotel under construction, and the total value is G-Land 1.8 million G-Land currency, and it will be paid in 3 equal installments as they deliver the goods to the hotel. So therefore, we do not know what is the currency rate, but you need to just then say, therefore they are looking for high value contract. So, and it says that the contract, if it's successful, can contribute to the company ambitious growth target. So the term ambitious growth target tells you they are looking for high return. So there are multiple evidence we bring to the answer to support our conclusion they are looking for high return. So then now we look for evidence of risk. So here the first risk is this G-land has never enjoyed stable democratic government. So government keep changing is a political risk. Then it says here they are notorious for corrupt business practices. Even custom officer demand bribes from both importer and exporter. So they are actually exporting to the country, and therefore the country is importing. They have to pay bribe. So therefore they are exposed to corruption, and that's called probity risk. And the country has a poor credit rating, so they are now exposed to credit risk. So we found already 3 risks associated, and these are relatively high risk. Then next, there's a contractual risk. The shipping to this overseas country is pretty long, about 3,000 kilometers, and they will not be paid until they deliver the goods. So the company is now subject to shipping risk. Now the examiner called the shipping risk called international trading risk, but no matter what name you call it, essentially we are now exposed to the risk of shipment delay, pirates robbing the ship, natural disaster creating accident, so the ship has accident or sank. So these are the risks associated. And lastly is the currency risk, because the billing is in G-land currency. So we are exposed to quite a lot of risk for this high return. So then you conclude they have a risk-seeking attitude, high risk appetite, and these are the risk and the return. So when you are able to do that, so you can see this answer is slightly different when you have a chance to compare to examiner suggested solution. This is a lot simpler to read, but it has all the key points examiner is looking for. So you can write simple but substantial answer like this in the examination, right? So this is the illustration on the risk. Now, so I'm going to do another illustration in the ethics. So I'm using the Kohlberg's moral development. Here we need to be able to do theory, which is to describe the model. So the examiner actually will ask you to describe sometimes. Now, moral, Kohlberg's belief, Kohlberg is a philosopher that believes a person's moral value will grow. Just like human body will grow from a young body to old body, but it says the person's moral value will grow from immature to become mature. So a person's moral value start from level 1 called pre-conventional, and therefore this is the immature level. Then to the level 2 called conventional, so slightly more mature, to the third level called post-conventional, and become even more mature. So this is called the moral development theory, and within each level there are 2 stages of growth. So the first one called pre-conventional. Now pre-conventional is actually like the baby and the young toddler, very young, very immature. So there are 2 stages. Stage 1, we assume this is we imagine this is a baby stage. So how do we teach baby what is right from wrong? We can't speak to the baby. Baby cannot comprehend what we say. So baby learn from what? Baby learn from actions. So for example, baby are curious. When they see a candle light, they have never seen that before. They see the light flicking, they are interested, they claw towards the light, the candle, they put forward the finger, they got burned, they cry. The next time they see the candle with the light, they will claw away and they'll cry. So baby learn action that are being punished are unethical. So if it's not punished, it's ethical. So this is a very immature moral value. This is called the punishment obedience orientation. Okay? So the baby then grow up to be toddler. Now toddler is still young, but they can start to understand things. So we can reward them. So if they give reward, they'll believe the action is right, and they keep doing it so that they can get the reward. So at this stage, it is called the instrumental stage. That means now action is an instrument to get reward. So any action that achieve reward is good, and they call that ethical. Okay? So these 2 stages are called pre-conventional because the person ethical belief is based on, is it good for me? If I get punished, it's no good. If I rewarded, it's good. Is it good for me? What is good for me is ethical. So you need to write at this stage, morality is in terms of reward punishment, okay, so-called pre-conventional. It's very inward looking. Then level 2, conventional. Then we start to have the person moral value becoming more mature. So the stage 3, good boy, nice girl, is like a teenager. Now teenager, what is right or wrong depends on his peers. So if my friends are doing this, it must be correct. If my friends say no, don't do this, it must be wrong. So now what is right and wrong is actually the expectation of significant groups. Expectation of significant groups means groups that are important to this person. It can be friends, but it can be also colleagues. So therefore, what is right or wrong is actually complying with other people's expectation. Okay? So this is called the teenage stage. We call that good boy, nice girl. Then this has another stage called stage 4. You can see it's called law and order. Now it's a bit more mature than stage 3, but it's still conforming to expectation. But now the expectation is the society norm, the law. Law is written based on the society norm. So long as I comply with society expectation, I comply with the law, I'm ethical. Okay? So if therefore this person, if the law say we should recycle, the person will recycle because it's ethical. But the law say the law doesn't need you to recycle, the person will, because they don't believe it is unethical. So this is conventional stage. So conventional stage, what is right or wrong is high compliance. High compliance is ethical, then non-compliance is unethical, but the compliance can be peer pressure, significant group, can be society expectation, law and regulation. Okay, so that's called level 2. Level 3 is more mature now. So the person go beyond society expectation, go beyond law, and they recognize actually law is imperfect. We can do better. So law will evolve, law will improve. But before the law is improved, let's do the right thing. So for example, the law does not require recycling, but we believe it's good. We believe it's good for the society, so it is in the public interest to recycle, so we recycle. So we do the ethical behavior because it is good for society. That's called stage 5. Good for society is the belief of social contract. Okay? I need to do good to society because society has treated me well. Now, stage 6 is called universal ethical principle. So now, it's not because it's good for society, it is because it complies with ethical principle. So this will be, thou shalt not kill, and I will not kill in any situation. Thou shalt not tell a lie, therefore I will always say the truth in any situation, even if the truth costs me personal damage. So whistleblower belong to stage 6. Okay? They want to be telling the truth, so they whistleblow against the company's unethical behavior, therefore they lose a job. So this is stage 6. But whistleblower can say it's not because of the principle of integrity, it's because a whistleblower, I can protect the society, then the person will be stage 5. But these two together is a more mature level, so it's called post-conventional. So this is a concept, but in exam, we need to know the concept and apply the concept. So if you look at this June 2015, question 4A. Okay? So part 1, so there are 2 requirements here. Part 1, distinguish between covert conventional, post-conventional. You need to describe. Okay? So just describe the 2. So you should be able to get 4 marks, each one 2 marks. So the 9 marks minus 4, we get 5. So again, we need to write key point. But it says, the case study here, there's a person called Mary. So she made a decision in the case. Her decision is to publicize something to the public. She become a whistleblower. She talked about the change in emission target. So the target the company wanted to do, she leaked this to the public. So therefore, we are supposed to then say which ethical approach she used to justify her action as ethical. So was she a conventional person or post-conventional person? So we need to write evidence from the case. So 2 evidence from the case get you 4 marks. Then the correct conclusion 1 mark. So that's how we get the 5 marks. So this is the facts of the case. The company is the pulp and paper company. So they produce paper. And Mary was the manager responsible to monitor, report environmental emission. Okay? She liked this job because she's a very environmentally friendly person. But her contract actually has a confidentiality clause. She is not supposed to disclose publicly the environmental target the company set. She is also not supposed to publish the company's performance. Okay? Now in this company, the environmental report is not publicized. The environmental report is sent to parent company. So she's not supposed to disclose. She signed that contract. Now, but the company had some bad decision made. They are supposed to invest in some new machine. This investment was delayed because the profit wasn't very good. But because the machine is old, the company is worried now the actual pollution emission will be higher than the target they set. So they wanted to cheat. How do they cheat is they want to increase the emission target, okay? So that they can show that the company actual performance is still within target. Now, so when Mary was told, she was not happy. So the case study say she was dismayed by the change. So what she did was she complained to the company CEO. She didn't want this to happen, but the CEO told her this is company's decision. She had to accept this decision until the company has enough money to bring in the new machine that cut down emission. So and that could be several years later. So she wasn't happy, so she decided to publicize this information to local newspaper and the local community. And both of them have been criticizing the company as a dirty factory. So when obviously we know when this is being published, there will be negative reaction from the newspaper and the local community. So where the board went to investigate and discover it was Mary that leaked the information to the public. So therefore she was terminated by the company because she breached the contract in terms of protecting confidential information. So these are the relevant information. So from here we are supposed to decide she's conventional or post-conventional. Now, so you can see here the you're supposed to have 4 marks from the case study and 1 mark for conclusion. You cannot just therefore say that she's post-conventional and then get 4 marks. So how do you then get higher mark? You need to use the information to say she is not conventional. She did this, that's why she's not conventional. And she did this, therefore she's conventional. So we have 2 different paragraphs and therefore 2 different points. Then you get 2 marks for each point, you get 4 marks. So let me show you. So you can see here, the conclusion she is conventional, post-conventional, 1 mark. So this paragraph, she is not conventional. So you can see here, she did not comply with the terms and conditions of a contract. Therefore, she is not conventional because a conventional person is high compliance person. So she will comply with rules, regulation, and constraint. And the contract is legal. So to her, highly ethical is highly compliant. So, but she didn't do that. That's why she's not at this level. You need to do that in the exam. Then next, you say that she did this not because she wanted to be honest. She did this because for public interest. That's why she informed the local community and the local newspaper because these are the ones affected by the pollution. So therefore, she is doing it for greater good. She is doing it for the wider community. So she is at actually stage 5. So that's called post-conventional. So you need to mention this in the examination to score high marks. If not, you only get 1 point, then you can only score 2 marks in the exam. Okay. So the last illustration I have for today is the Gray-Owen-Adams 7 social position. Now this 7 social position, sometimes we do have to give a brief description about this theory. So these are 7 positions in terms of social responsibility. So the left extreme, pristine capitalist, and the right extreme, deep green. The difference is this: the left side, company social responsibility is 0. So they don't believe company have a social responsibility. As we move to the right, the sense of social responsibility become more and more important. So you can see on the left, the only duty the business have is to maximize shareholder return. And we are not talking about unethical business. We are doing legal business, but our only duty is to maximize shareholder return. The business have no social responsibility. They believe the only social responsibility is through paying tax, through producing product, through producing jobs. So therefore, as long as they do that, if there's any social problem need to be solved, like environmental issue, the tax they pay will be used to benefit society. Okay? So they don't believe in, for example, additional contribution like that donation. Okay? The other extreme, the sense of social responsibility is almost 100%. So therefore they say that no human being, including shareholder director, have more right than any other species. So it is immoral for the environment to be damaged just to make profit. So this is almost anti-business, but it is not exactly there. It just say that, for example, businesses that actually have a big environmental impact should not even be there. Okay? Like we use up a lot of natural resources that cause the natural species to die, then it shouldn't be there. It's unethical. So this is a two extreme, but we need to know those between the two. Now in the exam, most of the case study will be using those on the left of the 7 social position, like pristine capitalist and expedient, social contract, and up to this one called social ecologist. Social ecologist. So I go through these 4 and then I'll show you one exam question. Now the pristine capitalist, the only moral duty of the director is shareholder wealth maximization. So anything that reduces shareholder wealth is unethical because you're stealing from shareholder. So therefore, as I said, they will not donate because donation reduces the money that we can give to shareholders. It's unethical. Expedient is also maximizing shareholder return, but they will contribute to society if the social responsibility expenditure help the company in the long term. So it supports business strategy in the long term. For example, it can help to create a favorable image. It helps us to have better strategic positioning. So donation is almost seen as an investment in branding. Okay? But the donation must be able to support that. So this kind of company, they will donate until everybody can see. They will not donate quietly, because donate quietly does not maximize return. Okay, those are called the expedient. Next, social contract. They still do business, but they say we must give back to society. So when we do business, we must also be aware of social norm, and then we must act in the way that society find acceptable. So if we do something that society don't accept, then the license can be withdrawn. That means social support can be withdrawn. The easiest example is the recent problem in China and North Korea created the problem for South Korea, because South Korea allowed the US Army to put the anti-missile system part, and that created strong objection from China. So one of the South Korean business operating extensively in China called Lotte, the government shut down the shops, so they couldn't even operate, and that's when the support from the society is withdrawn. So because they are not acting according to the society expectation, that's called the social contract. Social ecologist is not anti-business. Social ecologist is the business recognize the negative footprint on society and environment, and therefore there's a responsibility to minimize it. So it's not because of society expectation, not because of law. I'm keenly aware of my business, how it affects the society and the environment. I proactively take action to minimize it. That's called social ecologist. Okay. Now, so the exam question I want to illustrate is this exam question, March-June 2017, question 2A. Now this question here first started off by saying honeybees is a natural resource. Okay? It helps to pollinate plant, including fruit crops. But recently there's an observation that honeybee population is reducing at a very fast rate, and therefore one of the contributing reason could be because of the overconsumption of honey. So human consume honey, but honey is also used by the bee colony to populate. So because human take away the honey, so the bee couldn't have it, so the population shrink. So therefore this created environmental damage, but at the same time there's a social food impact. Overconsumption therefore reduced the honeybee. Honeybee couldn't populate the crops, so the food supply come down. So you can see this is a social impact. The food supply reduced. So environmental impact, social impact, both are negative from this observation. So this company is in a health food manufacturer. They therefore come up with a new product called honey bars, and honey bars use a natural honey substitute. So they are trying to promote honey bars so that human will switch from consuming natural honey to this product. If human cut down on the consumption of natural honey, honeybee population reduction can be addressed. It will not reduce. Sometimes maybe we can reverse the trend. Then it will also help the food supply. So they wanted to do this, and this is linked to the core strategic objective. So therefore they also donate, they committed to donate part of the sales from the honey bars brand to a research into the honeybee population so that they can solve this problem at the same time. So based on this information, we're supposed to say which position are they on, why, 4 marks. So therefore we need to describe a little bit about this theory and then talk about the position. So the description is the theoretical part. You can see I wrote here, which is consistent with what I showed you earlier on. Now we look at the case study. The position they are in is called social ecologists, not deep green. Now deep green will not even go into the honey product at all, okay? But they are recognizing the environmental footprint. So they recognize the honey consumption has negative environmental impact, so it will affect honeybee. They also recognize this will affect social footprint, so they say that they have responsibility to take action. You notice this action is not required by law, so they recognize it voluntarily. They take action to reduce the problem. So next, the action is to come up with a substitute. That will be one way to reduce the impact. Another action is to donate in the research. That will also contribute to the reduction on impact on environment. So they voluntarily take action to minimize footprint is a characteristic of social ecologists. So these are the evidence you need to bring into your answer to substantiate. Okay, so that is how P1 exam question should be answered. A lot of evidence from the case tie back to the theory. You need to illustrate that in exam. So I hope this sharing with you will give you some idea how to tackle this exam question in the coming December exam. Right. So I'd like to end my presentation now, and if you do have any question, I can see it from here, and also I take question for the next few minutes. Thank you very much. Okay, Yanjing, right, so I acknowledge if you have no questions. I hope this is helpful. Okay, thank you for attending. Right, good luck. So since there are no more questions from you guys, thank you very much for attending this. All the best to your exam. Bye bye.